In a world where everyone is talking about self-love, healing, and boundaries, why are millions still stuck in undefined, confusing relationships they can't seem to walk away from? We live in a time where emotional intelligence is celebrated more than ever. Instagram is flooded with posts about knowing your worth, setting boundaries, not settling for less. And yet, somehow, even you smart, self-aware, someone who's done the healing work, find yourself drawn back to someone distant, yet unwilling to let you go. Someone who says they're not ready, that they don't want anything serious, that they need space, but they never actually leave you alone. They won't commit, but they also won't set you free. You're stuck in a gray zone, where something always feels off, but never wrong enough to justify leaving. If you've been caught in that emotional limbo, or you've just barely broken free, this video will walk you through 5 questions avoidance can't answer. But more importantly, these are questions you must ask if you want to stop bleeding your energy into emotional confusion. Because sometimes, the questions you dare to ask will finally confirm the truth you've always felt but never had the words to name. Oh no. The first question begins to unravel the emotional defenses they've spent years building. Question 1. What are you actually afraid will happen if someone truly loves you? There are some questions we don't ask to get an answer. We ask them to finally see the truth that lives in someone else's silence. And this is one of those questions. A question you must ask not to change them, but to set yourself free from the illusion that they truly don't need love. What are you actually afraid would happen if someone fully loved you? It sounds simple, but when asked at the right moment, in the right energy, not from desperation but from grounded clarity, this question becomes a mirror, reflecting the most guarded, unspoken wound inside the avoidant person. Because the truth is, most avoidant don't hate love. They still long for it. They still want to be seen, held, known. But deep down, they carry an unspoken belief. If someone truly sees all of me, they will leave. It's not closeness they fear. It's being fully seen and then rejected. To be truly loved, you have to let someone witness every part of you. Your fear, your shame, your unfinished healing. But if you grew up being told your feelings were too much, inconvenient, or weak, then love becomes a risk, not a refuge. For the avoidant, love isn't a safe space. It's an emotional battlefield. They would rather keep distance than face the possibility of being dependent, exposed, or worse, truly known. Their fear isn't rational, it's somatic, it's unconscious. They'll say, I need freedom. I don't want to be controlled. But when you gently ask, why does love equal control? They freeze. Because the fear didn't start in this relationship. It started in their body, in their childhood, in their nervous system. Love has always had conditions. Love meant being smaller, quieter, less needy, less yourself. And this is the deepest irony. They want love but won't let themselves be loved. So this question doesn't just reveal contradictions in their logic. It also shows the futility of trying to love someone out of a fear they've never admitted to themselves. You can pour all the patience in the world into them, but if they don't believe they're worthy of being loved, they'll sabotage any relationship that comes close to healing them. This question doesn't need an answer. It only asks that you be brave enough to witness the avoidance in their silence and realize that silence isn't a rejection of you. It's a protective system they haven't yet outgrown. Question 2. If you don't need emotional connection, why do you keep intimate relationships? After you ask the first question, what are you actually afraid would happen if someone truly loved you, and sense the hesitation, the unease, you start to feel a gap in how they respond. And in that moment, you begin to see, avoidant attachment isn't a conscious choice. It's a reflex built on unhealed wounds. But then something paradoxical happens. If they truly don't need emotional connection, as they claim, why do they stay in relationships? Why do they come back? Why can't they fully let go of you? That's when you ask, if you don't need emotional connection, why are you still maintaining intimate relationships? This question has the power to crack through the mask of logic avoidance, often wear to protect themselves from emotional confrontation. They tend to present themselves as independent, rational, and unaffected by feelings. They believe they can enter a relationship without truly attaching. But this question exposes a contradiction logic can't resolve. If someone genuinely doesn't need emotional bonding, then being alone should feel natural, even preferable. They wouldn't come back. They wouldn't keep texting just to check in. They wouldn't flinch when you start to pull away. But in reality, they do come back. They stay in your orbit. They remain emotionally entangled, just not deeply or clearly enough to feel secure. They don't want you too close, but they can't let you go either. And somewhere in that gray zone, the truth reveals itself. They do crave connection, they just can't admit it. Because to admit they need someone is to admit vulnerability. And for someone who grew up believing vulnerability equals danger, loss, or shame, that kind of admission feels unbearable. In their world, connection equals risk. They may have once opened their heart and been ignored, controlled, abandoned, or shamed. So now, they've learned to keep people close enough to avoid loneliness, but far enough to avoid the pain of emotional exposure. They develop a kind of indirect dependency. They won't say they need you, but they hope you stay. They won't ask for reassurance, but your presence quietly regulates their self-worth. They won't express love, but they react when you pull away. This second question brings all of that contradiction into focus. If you don't need emotional closeness, why does my presence matter so much to you? They'll struggle to answer this clearly because they've never truly examined the fact that they depend on love more than they've ever allowed themselves to believe. What they really seek is internal validation, but they don't know how to receive it. From the lens of attachment theory, avoidants tend to minimize their emotional needs, but their nervous system still craves co-regulation and bonding. They may say, "I'm fine on my own. I don't need a relationship," but unconsciously, they still long for someone to see them, stay with them, and affirm their worth, not out of obligation, but out of genuine love. Without realizing it, your presence has become emotional validation for them. Your patience makes them feel worthy. Your return after distance confirms they're not unlovable. But that doesn't mean they're ready to give love in return. Sometimes, they're simply using your presence to fill a self-worth gap they've never known how to repair. And that's why this question is so important. It doesn't just challenge them. It helps you understand the role you may be playing in their emotional defense system. Are you their partner? Or are you just proof that they're not alone, not broken, not invisible? Is this a relationship built on mutual love and emotional safety? Or are you just helping them escape their emptiness while sacrificing your own? Question 3. Why does it hurt when someone you claim doesn't matter starts pulling away? After you've asked the second question, if you don't need emotional connection, why are you still in intimate relationships? And witness their hesitation, you start to realize there's a hidden need for connection beneath all the distancing. But then something even more confusing happens. You begin to pull away. You stop texting. You no longer react to their silence. You start reclaiming your emotional freedom. And then they show up. Maybe it's a late-night message, a sudden wave of jealousy, a vague check-in full of warmth they never showed before. The same person who once said, "We're not serious," or "I'm not ready for anything real," is now acting like they're terrified to lose you. This is the moment for question 3, a question not just to confront them, but to help you see the emotional truth they've been avoiding. If I don't matter, why does it hurt when I leave? This question hits directly at the foundation of their defense system. It's not aggressive, it's not confrontational, but it exposes a powerful contradiction inside the avoidant attachment system. They say they don't need you, but they react as if your absence is unbearable. What's happening isn't love, not the secure, mature kind. It's a panic response triggered by their attachment system. John Bowlby, the founder of attachment theory, described this decades ago. Our attachment system is activated not when things are calm, but when a bond is at risk of breaking. Avoidant individuals often suppress their emotions during stable periods. But when the other person starts stepping back, their nervous system goes into crisis mode. They might message you, come back, express feelings they've been withholding for months. But this is not maturity. It's not growth. It's abandonment panic disguised as reconnection. This question reveals something most people miss. They do have feelings. They just don't know how to process those feelings in a healthy way. And because they can't regulate themselves emotionally, they use you as emotional anesthesia. They don't call it love. They don't label it dependence. But they can't tolerate your absence either. You become their emotional sedative, the thing they reach for when their system goes into alert. And the most dangerous part? You might mistake their panic for love. You might think their jealousy, their sudden return, means they finally realized how much they care. But the truth is, they're not reacting to you. They're reacting to the loss of control over the emotional bond. Someone who truly loves you responds when you need them. Someone avoidant responds when they need you to stabilize their inner world. And here's a truth you might not want to hear, but it will set you free. You are no longer responsible for carrying their fear. You don't have to stay until they're ready. You don't have to be the emotional container for their panic. You don't have to shrink your healing just because they're not doing their own. Because if you stay only to avoid hurting them, you're sacrificing your emotional safety to keep someone who can't meet you in emotional maturity. Question 4. What would need to happen for you to feel safe being emotionally vulnerable? By now, you've seen the truth. They do have feelings, but they don't know how to handle them. They panic when you pull away, yet they couldn't express affection when you were available. They didn't hold you, but they couldn't let you go. This leads us to a deeper contradiction, because when you ask them what would make vulnerability feel safe, they often can't answer. Not clearly, not coherently, not honestly, and that's when you need to ask the fourth question. What would need to happen for you to feel safe being truly vulnerable with someone? This question challenges everything they believe about themselves. It's uncomfortable because it requires them to admit that their emotional distance isn't a personal preference, but a fear response. That coldness wasn't a choice, it was a coping mechanism. They might say, I'm afraid of being abandoned. I just need to know I won't get hurt. I need to be sure I can trust someone fully. But here's the truth. Absolute certainty doesn't exist in real love. If their safety depends on guarantees that don't exist, then they're not seeking connection, they're trying to control it. So what's really missing from their answer? They can't define what safety actually looks like because they've never truly felt it. Emotional safety was never modeled or given to them growing up, so now they perform distance instead of learning intimacy. They talk about not wanting to be hurt, but can't articulate what trust actually means to them. And most importantly, they rarely say, I haven't healed that part of me yet, because admitting that would threaten the self-image they've built around being strong, unaffected, and independent. This is where you stop waiting for an answer and start setting boundaries for yourself. If they can't name what would help them feel safe, you have to ask yourself, am I waiting for something that doesn't exist? Am I hoping they'll change even though they haven't built the emotional tools to do so? And if you found yourself caught in that cycle, waiting for someone to finally feel safe enough to love you properly, then you need to understand this. You might be making their emotional growth your responsibility when it never was. The real danger of this question is not that it challenges them. The danger is, it's something they've never dared ask themselves. They've built an identity around being fine alone, but deep down, they're still scared kids who never learned how to feel safe in connection. And this question says, without blame, love isn't about asking for permission to feel. Love is about showing up emotionally without trying to control someone else's reaction. So why should you ask this question? Not to fix them, not to make them grow, but so you can take your power back. You might say, if you need guarantees to open up, I understand. But I also need to know I can keep my boundaries if that never happens. You don't need perfection from them, but you do need someone willing to face their wounds. You deserve to be loved by someone who takes responsibility for their own healing. That's when the truth becomes clear. You're not here to be their safe place at the expense of your emotional clarity. You don't need to wait for someone who's still frozen in fear, hoping they'll thaw because of how patient or kind you are. Because if they can't answer, what would make you feel safe in love? Then they're not ready to co-create emotional safety. They're still trying to control vulnerability so they don't have to feel it. Once you realize they can't answer this question clearly, it becomes obvious. They might not be avoidant by nature. They might just be terrified of connection and convincing themselves that they're better off alone. Which leads to the final question, the one that strips away all illusions. Are you truly someone who doesn't form emotional bonds? Or are you just scared to and trying to convince yourself you don't need anyone? Question 5. You believe you're someone who doesn't form emotional bonds. But if we look at your behaviors, your emotions, your reactions, are you sure that's true? This is the final question, but in many ways, it's the most piercing. It doesn't accuse, it doesn't blame, but it does something far more confronting. It holds up a mirror between who they think they are and how they actually behave in relationships. Because the avoidant often builds their identity on one core belief: I don't get attached. But reality tells a different story. They say, I don't care if you leave. But they spiral into jealousy, become passive-aggressive, or reappear when they sense you're slipping away. They insist, I don't need anyone. But they expect you to be endlessly patient, to tolerate distance, and to keep loving them unconditionally even when they give nothing in return. This is the contradiction that shatters their emotional logic. This question forces them to see the gap between belief and behavior. And for most avoidants, this gap is wide and painful to admit. They've spent years convincing themselves that they don't need anyone, when in fact, they're deeply comforted by your presence. They've claimed detachment while internally fearing abandonment. They've told themselves they're independent, but their nervous system still lights up the moment emotional safety feels threatened. Why? Because their distance was never just about preference. It was protection. And this question reveals it. What does this question really expose? It reveals how emotional avoidance is often built on self-deception. A story they told themselves long ago to stay safe. If I act like I don't care, maybe it won't hurt as much when people leave. But the truth is, it still hurts. They still feel. They still long. And when you ask this question with clarity and calm, it lands not like an attack, but like a reckoning. If you're truly avoidant, why does it feel like you're still trying to be loved, even while pushing love away? Why this question shakes the entire emotional foundation? Because it's not about you analyzing them. It's about giving them the chance to finally turn inward to ask, am I really as detached as I claim? Or am I just afraid to admit how much I want connection and how unequipped I am to receive it? This isn't a trick. It's an invitation to reconcile the performance of independence with the reality of emotional need. And here's what this means for you, the partner who's been holding space. You can stop blaming yourself for the inconsistency. You can stop second-guessing your sanity, because the mixed signals weren't about you being too emotional or too needy. They were about them not being in touch with their own inner truth. And that means their struggle to love isn't proof that you're unlovable. It's a reflection of their unhealed wounds and the protective walls they still live behind. Where do you go from here? Once you've asked all 5 questions, you'll see something clearly. It's not just that they avoid intimacy. It's that they avoid themselves. They avoid the mirror. They avoid the tenderness. They avoid the work of feeling. And this final question gives you the clarity to choose. Are they just emotionally unavailable? Or are they emotionally disconnected from their own truth? Because unless they're willing to face that disconnect, no amount of patience, loyalty, or unconditional love from you will build the relationship you deserve. Sometimes the most painful moment in love isn't being rejected. It's standing in front of someone who simply cannot answer the questions you've deserved answers to for so long. Not because they're cruel, not because they never cared, but because they've never been connected enough to themselves to fully connect with you. And when you ask, why do you pull away when I get close? Why do you come back when I've finally let go? Do you really not need anyone? Or are you just terrified of needing someone and being hurt? They look at you not with understanding, but with the lost expression of someone who never learned how to name the storm raging inside their chest. Here's what you must understand. Love cannot grow in the soil of emotional denial. You cannot carry the emotional growth for both people. You cannot love for the both of you. You cannot fix the wounds they're still pretending don't exist. And so if they can't answer, then you must ask yourself a new question. Do I keep waiting for this person to change? Or do I finally choose myself and walk away from the fog? Love was never meant to be a test of endurance. It's a co-creation, a journey between two people brave enough to stay present with their truth instead of running from it. And if you're the one who dared to ask, who dared to face reality, you are not weak. You're already stepping onto the path of secure attachment, even if that path begins with walking it alone. You cannot build a healthy relationship from a wounded self. Dr. Nicole LaPera. And you cannot keep a relationship alive when you're the only one breathing life into it. If you're on your healing journey, or just trying to understand your attachment style, your emotional patterns, and what keeps repeating in your relationships, make sure to subscribe or follow this channel for deeper content on attachment psychology, healing from the inside out, and building emotional clarity. Because sometimes you don't need them to come back. You just need someone to remind you. You were never wrong for loving the way you did.